right. I felt a little fist bumping with that music today going.
Yeah, really exciting.
It's kind of a change of pace. So, Fernando, how's everything going today?
Yeah,
Welcome to the.
it's really great. It's a bit hot here. I think 80 to 90 degrees. So great weathers.
Awesome. And I think we're almost the same here. We're like in the 70s, so it's always mid-transitionary period, um, which is interesting because we always have some of the people from Brazil coming up for vacations and stuff, right?
Yeah.
And typically when we get into vacations, everybody starts thinking of like spring break here, right? And that ties in really nicely to our topic for today, education. So I always bring it back full circle, man. You should know some of that's going to come around.
Yeah.
So welcome everyone to Transform Tuesdays. My name's Andrew Kim, and then we have Fernando Vizcaino here today.
Yeah.
Uh, we're going to be going through some different data transformation workflows. This is a show talking about data transformation in general and how that applies to the world in which we work on a regular basis. And we will be discussing different analytics platforms. Um, Today I've got a NIME workflow. Fernando, what kind of workflow do you have today?
I have an Outrix workflow. Always Outrix, actually.
Always Alteryx. Nice, nice. Yeah, let's go ahead and I'm going to share my screen and we'll go ahead and dive into this first workflow here. So when we're taking a look at this one, um, we're going to go through our normal questions here today, right? So what is it that we like about this particular workflow? So ironically, this one's about data cleansing in general. And when we talk about data cleansing within the education space, a lot of that stems around things like location information. Maybe there's things like birthdays that's really important in terms of education, right? Because that may dictate what grade the student is in, etc. And we could kind of track some of those different things, right? And then the other portion that we look at is geography, right? So when we're looking at geography, how is it that um, when we're looking at these, maybe it's, in this case, it's countries, in other cases, it could be counties. How does that relate to students overall? And when we look at this, right, you've got students' information coming in from two different systems. And then as always, these are like little macros or nodes that expand within NIME. What I like about this one is it's really pulling in, this is actually another one that's a macro that's multi-use, right? That's doing customer information or even student information. And then it's essentially just concatenating that information and it's adding in duplicates if the columns are duplicated, right? Or the rows are, and then it's also choosing how to store the data, whether that's caching in this instance. And then what I do like about this is there's even an overview in regards to some of the data exploration, right? So understanding similar to what you see in Alteryx in regards to the validation tools, etc., or data investigation tools, it helps you understand some of that information, right? So when we start looking at this, what I like here is I like the fact that we're going in this case, we're trying to do some charting in relation to the age groups. So when we're discussing, in this instance, student data, we're just trying to clean it up in the beginning. So like if you're looking at historical data and education, there may be a lot of it that's related now to streaming platforms, right? So hey, are we getting enough attendance in our Zoom classroom, or is it all virtual? Sorry, not virtual, or is it all switching back to in person? And then when we look at that, right, is there hybrid components that we need to be aware of with students? So we can look at that and break it down by age groups. So maybe we look at in the future, there's actually the high school demographic. Are they the ideal ones who should be maybe learning from home? Or is this something that should be more at the younger grade levels? I mean, that's a great question. So as we kind of look at some of this data um, and just try and understand like what's clear here, right? So you've got name cleansing that's kind of happening here. And then you've even got some things which are meant to autocorrect uh, mistakes and then even look for nearest neighbors in terms of whether those are IDs, etc. here. And it just allows for that to run a little bit cleaner. And you can see here, like it's even going to tell you some of these nodes are broken. And then for ages, right? This is great because what it allows you to do is essentially come in here and factor in some of the missing ages. So in this case, I'm basically saying, hey, if it's a string, do nothing, right? Or maybe we can do most frequent value. In some cases, we may not want the age to be factored in there. And then let's say for whatever reason, there's duplicate students, maybe they transferred classrooms, etc. And we want a unique count at a school or maybe a county level. We could kind of see that over time.
Yeah, just actually, this is my first time seeing a Nime workflow. I think
Yeah.
maybe 5 years ago, I tried downloading and using similar to Outrix. So let me check how is my first impression related to
Yeah.
this tool. I did the same with Outrix. With Outrix, the first thing I tried doing is to sum data. I use a
Mm.
formula to sum, and it didn't work. Use the sum function, so it was not easy for the first time, for first impression. And related to Nime, the first thing I tried doing is filtering data. And
Ooh.
if I remember, and if I'm not mistaken, uh, there was like 5 different types of filters, and I was not able to filter the data as well. And that was the only thing I tried doing, and I deleted Nime after. So it's great to see something working there.
Yeah, and when we look at that, I mean, I think when we're looking at data transformation, there's those base tools or the like favorites tools, right, that everybody kind of focuses on. And it's always interesting to see different approaches in relation to that. So you have one approach really, which is, hey, this filter filters anything, right? Any type of data, etc. And then what you see here in Nime, which is kind of interesting, is what is it that we're trying to filter, right? And then basically there's a tool for each one of those.
Yeah,
So like a duplicate filter, you have like row splitting, row-based filters, right? Or even a column-based filter. It's just interesting to kind of see the different approaches
yeah.
in
So it's way
relation.
more than 5 different filters there. So that's why
Yeah.
I think I chose the hardest thing to do in Nine. Well, one thing that I found very interesting is that you were able to click on the input data there, and you have full configurations to the file, right? So student information, you have other tools inside as well.
Yes. Yeah, so if you looked at this, right, I could come in here and do that same inputting of data. And when we talk about that, honestly, that's the hardest part to get used to with any platform, right? Is how do you enter the data in? And sometimes in this case, it's a file, right? Where maybe you're browsing, right? And then again, where does it read from? So this is almost like what you see within other platforms, relative, UNC, absolute. It's all the same here, right? There's just a slightly different naming convention. What's interesting is it's doing it relative and it's saying basically to what, right? Or I could do the mount point. Okay, it's local, it's in my temp space, it's in my hub, right? It's in examples. So it's kind of interesting to see different approaches for how
Yeah.
different software platforms handle it.
Yeah, it seems like have more options there than Outrix. Is that correct? A correct assumption? Because I'm seeing a lot of different tabs there. Uh, a lot of things that I cannot read from here. You have encoding, flow variables.
Yeah, yeah. So there's some auto encoding here, some other variables when we look at like the transformations, right? You can set up those rules. There's advanced settings for trimming white space around quotes. Um, you have table specifications in terms of pulling data in. I mean, this is pretty intense in regards to some of what you're doing. Some of these settings, like if you look at it, right, are common, like even to Alteryx, hey, you're going to skip first number of rows. It's just how it's set up. So like that's all in one menu. This has a couple different tabs to kind of break out how you're handling that.
Okay,
So
yeah, that's
this is still my favorite though, just so we're clear. You can literally choose on individual tools. Do you want it to cache in memory or do you want it to write to the disk?
this is amazing actually.
Yeah, so pretty cool stuff. And so that's one of the ones that I had here, which is pretty simple. So again, how do you kind of clean up information in relation to education? And a lot of that is basically just around names, addresses, etc. Right? And then when we kind of look at this, right, another one that I want to show is similar, and that's when we're talking about like meetings or attendance, right? Um, this was actually one that I found that was just a solution. Actually, this was Joshua Brokow who responded to this, who's a former ACE. Um, and what's interesting about this workflow is it's talking about meeting attendees, right? And then who overall was in the meeting. And maybe you have these listed out. So it could literally be just like classroom attendees, right? Or students in the classroom. And when we look at these, we may want to know, hey, which students can we mix up or jumble up in these classes, right? So there's software literally related to classroom assignment um, that's built out. But if you just had Alteryx, right, how can you kind of jumble that up? Or let's even say for creating teams, you can create randomizers using these platforms to accomplish that. And you can use the random sample, right? Um, and then even just the randomization within the formula tool to assign numbers to people, and then essentially group those individuals together. So this one was pretty cool. And when I look at this, right, so I like how simple it is. Literally, you can see here's all the individuals that were attendees. You pivot that data, so now it essentially looks like it came in a JSON format, right? We're just going to sort that. We're going to assign whether there was a meeting conflict or not, which could be classroom attendance, right? And then we concatenate who has a particular conflict with this meeting, and then when is the best meeting time for this, or maybe it's a classroom schedule, right? So when should we have PE, like physical education or music? Is there a best time to kind of do this to allow for individuals maybe at a particular grade level or classroom setting to kind of make that successful? So I think the only thing that this kind of does that is this was just kind of a quick solution, right? If I were looking at this, I'd want to know, hey, when are those meeting times? Either where there's a conflict or where is the perfect opportunity, kind of like the platform that we use called Calendly, right? So that platform literally allows us to figure out, hey, this is the best time when all of us can kind of collaborate together and we can assign those meeting opportunities. So, and then
That's
if you were sharing some of these insights, Fernando, like what's some of the things that you would want to do um, if you were sharing with someone else, like information related to either best class schedules for school? Like, how would you want to share some of that
What do
data?
you mean?
So, like, if let's say you're a student, right? So you're a university, and we're talking about trying to find the ideal schedule for you,
Oh, I
right?
see. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
something that we actually we did when we were in college. So since we had like I think 800 students for the engineering school, and we could choose between 10 different classes, right? So we had lot of options, and the main idea for us would be to have one free day. So it's integral from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. and we're trying to gather as many friends as we could in the same class, right?
Nice.
So only one would need to attend the class
I thought
and
you were
share
gonna
all the
say do the
knowledge.
homework or something.
Yeah, but that's also the idea. So, but also for us to have like Friday free for us to do anything else. So that would be not ideal, right? But that would be what I would try doing uh, with those schedules. So that's
Nice.
really hard since we had like 20, I think 10 or 15 different classes that we need to choose for us to get the best schedule and to have one free day. It's like an optimization problem,
Mm,
right? It took us like 2 weeks to decide the best way. And I think we would be able to do that in Outrex quite easily, it seems. Now that I have all the experience, all the knowledge, back then I didn't even know how to use Excel actually. So
so now it's like coming
yeah,
full circle, right?
yeah, but it's too late for that, right?
Yeah, I think unless you want to go back to school, you want to go back for your doctorate or something, Fernando?
No, no.
Yeah,
The
it's
only thing
always
I'm studying right now is chess, and I'm only
just
interested in that actually.
ooh. So speaking of new moves, right? Because like you've got me thinking of like the Queen's Gambit now, right? Where we're just trying to figure out different ways in which people approach learning. So when we discuss that, you have some interesting thoughts on how education is kind of getting reshaped with communities. Do you want to show us the workflow that you have
Yeah,
in mind for
sure.
this?
Yeah, sure. So the idea here is, of course, when we think about education, we always start thinking about college, about books, and we don't think about YouTube videos, for example, or even communities. So here, what I'm doing this workflow is basically getting all the information from the Outrex community. And the idea there, I have actually two different ideas with this workflow. The first one's for me to know uh, how much or how many posts or how well I'm collaborating there, how many posts, how many replies, how many solutions I have. As
Hmm.
an ace, I need to always measure that. But also, I'm interested in knowing what are the most current questions, most what the people has more difficult with, and
Hmm.
that's why I created this workflow, right? Of course, it was not easy to develop. I first tried web scraping, and I had no idea that we had like APIs created for this process. So here, actually, my top left, I have the reference here for anyone that's trying to download things from the community. For a lot of them, I'm not sure what actually Chorus is, but for many different communities, it's all based on these APIs. Not sure if you know that, Andrew King, something related to Chorus, but we have a lot of different communities based on this API or this structure. Actually, I have no idea what I'm
Of
saying right
course.
now. But the idea
Yeah.
there is that, and I can show here. So we have all the APIs, and I can basically download everything from the community: posts,
Wow.
users, likes. solutions, and that's what I am to do here.
That's really cool.
Yeah,
And I think when we talk about that, right, um, a lot of people focus heavily on certifications, etc., right? So when we're talking about education in general, we look at degrees. Um, and I think as we talk about education, like even working with different publishers, right? They have badges like through Credly, etc. That's starting to become a way of measuring those small incremental gains that we have in regards to education, right?
yeah,
So I like this because what we get to see here is essentially that growth of how can we measure things at smaller levels, right? So be more like maybe some of the publishing companies, or are they doing everything that we want in terms of measuring so we can adapt? And if you're in the teaching space, right, you may want to understand, hey, is the way in which I'm delivering this information effective? So it could be as simple as a little quiz, right? Um,
yeah,
or it could be participation, so responding to questions or responding to other people. Those things can be helpful. And that kind of goes back to what you're talking about, maybe a specific topic or something. I'm thinking like if you're in math class or something, chess club, right, in education space. So if people keep asking about maybe how to castle, right, you may want to do a
yeah.
whole session on just that, uh, or um, what some of the best moves for essentially trapping the queen in chess, right? So yeah.
You seem like you know a little bit about chess. Not sure how much. Would be great to play with you. Okay,
Yeah, we're gonna have to
but
do that.
yes. So one thing that's very important here, of course, it's a selfish reason for me to create this workflow. The idea here is, of course, let me check what are the most important questions or the most viewed posts. Because the idea here, of course, since we are creating a lot of content to YouTube, it's
Mm,
better for me to publish things that the users are interested in. If my main goal is to be a famous YouTuber, for example. If I want to gather more views, then I need to create content related to what's really important. So that's, I think that's something that's not a lot of YouTubers actually do, but that's something
mm,
that's really important for you to have, right? Of course, you are basically analyzing your own content, seeing the interaction in your personal content, but you have no way of finding out what others are doing in a more efficient way. Of course, I can start going to different uh, channels and checking the most viewed topic, but we can do that in a batch. So we can use, for example, YouTube APIs to do that for us and start analyzing way more than just views. We can start, for example, checking comments. So
yeah.
checking using sentimental analysis in those comments to see how well people are accepting that, right?
Yeah, and I think that's important, right? When we're looking at these solutions, like I hinted a little bit at math, but there's other subjects that technically have more than one answer, right? And as when we look even at history, I think there's different viewpoints in terms of historical events, right? So when we talk about becoming a more global and holistic and inclusive economy and um, countries in general, right? I think that's where some of this information is going to be helpful, is kind of aggregating it and piecing those view together so you can really get a 360, right? So from a learning perspective, um, just saying like, hey, Fernando, you basically participated in these things. I can give you a 1 or a 0 in terms of participation, right? Is different than, hey, are you being inquisitive and can I rate you or grade you based on maybe your curiosity, right? Or your helpfulness. in regards to the subject matter. I think that shows like a higher level of expertise or even of understanding.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly the idea. So let me just show you a bit of this workflow. So the
Yeah,
idea
let's
here
dive
is
in.
that uh, I'm working with APIs, right? So I have my base URL here. Let me see if I can zoom in. So it's all related to my communities, not my community, Outrex communities. And what I'm trying to get there are only the things related to what I'm actually participating. So it's, for example, designer, server, connect, promote, general discussions, and also the ones here from Brazil. So I want to measure everything that they are talking about, but also how well I'm participating with everyone there.
Nice.
There are a lot of things here in this workflow. So as you can see, there are a lot of steps here. But the main idea here is that first, I'm downloading all the topics. So as you can see here, of course, this is only a sample. I'm getting only the first 5 pages for each board of discussion.
Mm.
I have everything downloaded already. So everything related to this these boards, it's all here. So I have like almost 250,000 different comments. So this means message, solutions, topic starters.
Those all your comments?
No,
Just
unfortunately,
kidding.
no. But I can show my later. But as you can see here, there are a lot of things here actually. So the
Yeah.
first step for me was to create a very simple data set here. And I can
Mm.
show that right here. So I have all the topics. So for all the boards, all the authors, the post time, the subject, and a few columns related to statistics. So for example, the number of views, the number
Mm.
of likes, the number of messages or interactions, solutions, and the number of solutions as well. And if I want to click, I have the community link here to check and
Mm.
basically see if I'm doing everything the way it should. So the idea for this first part was for me to start analyzing what I can create for the user. So as the most current or the most important or the most viewed topic, uh, I can create a video, right? So the first step there, and I can move to my second workflow, is for me to start analyzing those topics. So
Mm.
this is a lot of trial and error. That there isn't a right way of analyzing this post, but the idea here is that, of course, let me check, for example, related to boards. Of course, we always have problems,
Mm.
but I was checking first how many topics I have for each of the parts, right?
Wow.
And solve topics, how many solutions I have there. So as you can see, we have like maybe half of it. We don't have a solution for it, but that
Wow.
doesn't mean that we don't have a solution. That can mean that the users are not marking the the message as a solution. And
Okay.
since I'm there all the time, I know that that's what usually happens. For example, for the server, we
Yeah.
don't get solutions for that, but have a lot of questions with answers, correct answers, right?
Yeah.
So maybe I will not focus on solved topics or unsolved topics. I will see everything as a whole. So I start,
Okay.
of course, a lot of preparation here for me to get additional columns, for example, the number of days, number of months, or to separate, for example, here, I have a filter tool because I'm interested more in the most recent topics. Since Outrex is always evolving, maybe those questions from the past are not questions from nowadays, right? So I'm
Mm.
removing here from 2019 until 2 months ago.
Okay.
And then I can explain why I'm doing that. So the idea here is, of course, let's first check, for example, labels. So I have one column related to labels.
Mm.
This all included by users, so that's not bulletproof. You can include as many labels as you want, and that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean since you are you need to include at least one label. Maybe there are a lot of nonsense here, so not
Hmm.
sure if we can use that. But what I can see here is that we have a lot of interest, a lot of questions related to data sets, right?
Okay.
A lot
Yeah.
of questions related to workflow, but that doesn't make a lot of sense because Alteryx, it's all workflows.
Everything's workflows.
Yeah, and you have questions related to database connection. Have a lot of things related to data sets and database connections. So maybe that's a common problem, a common river when how to handle a driver or something like that. As
Hmm.
well as batch macros, apps, there are very common topics and a lot of questions related to that. So maybe we need to create something related to that, right?
Yeah.
And I start sorting things out here. So for example, let me check in here. All right. The first thing I was trying to do, all related to rage, so views per day. So that's what I was
Mm.
trying to do, and that's why I removed the first 2 months. Because for the first day, for example, the first 3 days, you get a lot of views.
Yeah.
So I'm removing all of that to keep my rate more stable, right? And of course, here it's all I need to do this all manually, but I'm checking, for example, a lot of issues related to concatenate, and we have like a rate of 50 views per day, only related to concatenate data. It's a very simple topic, but if we had a video related to that, I think it would be great for the end users. Deleting rows, so there are a lot of different things here that we can do, but of course this is all manual, and we can try doing that in a more dynamic or automatic way, right? So what I did here, of course, this very simple, but I was trying to use uh, text mining to analyze my data, right? So of
Mm.
course first I start by pre-processing my data. So here the I think it's lemmatization, right?
Yeah. Lemmatization.
All right. And I start removing all the most current words. So
Mm.
I don't want to see anything related to Alteryx, to this word specifically. And I was including some words here that doesn't really matter for my analysis, right? And
No
of course,
gallery? You're not going to include gallery?
no gallery. So if I'm not analyzing anything related to server, it's all
Ah,
related to
that's true.
gallery. So I
Yeah.
separated, actually, I have two filters here. One to analyze everything in designer and everything in server. And then I start separating by topics. Of course, as an example here, I separate everything in 3 topics. Of course, I have way more than that. But the idea is for me to try finding anything that I could start working with. So I
Mm.
separated into 3 different topics. Of course, I didn't validated everything, so I have a lot of similar words in all of them. But for
Hmm.
example, here I can see it's very basic, but as you can see, it seems like basic problems. So it
Yeah.
would be great for us to start having more basic videos related to this type of process. As we all know, we have a lot of Excel users working in Alteryx, so
Hmm.
maybe that's a great topic for us to have a lot of different, very basic videos. And that's what
Yeah.
I was aiming for. Of course, inputs, output, file, error, workflow, Excel, value. So things like basic questions related to Excel data prep, right?
Hmm. Exactly.
And then, of course, since I didn't have a lot of time to analyze the data. As you can see, we have all um, the same words here. But that means that maybe we have a lot of issues related to this. So this
Yeah.
is, of course, I have to find ways of separating this in a better way. And of course, we can do that with this topic modeling tool to increase the difference between words, between word clouds,
Yeah.
and once again Excel. So maybe, of course, the first impression here is that I didn't do a great job of separating into topics, but maybe there's a different way of seeing that we have a lot of problem related to Excel, right?
Yeah, and
And
I
the
think
same goes. Sorry, go ahead, Kiki.
when we look at this, right, the highest level topics seem to be the same, but what I see that's kind of changing is those intermediate topics, right? So like date parsing looks like it's probably an issue, right?
Yeah,
There's lots of questions in relation to errors and macros. And then dynamic is something that I see kind of popping up a lot.
yeah.
So
Dynamic, macro, rejects,
yeah, yeah,
and then of course we have for server, and then that's another word that I need to remove from. We have a lot of error that's something that I need to remove, but we have file, output, app, and that's the first video that I actually created for data mining. Is related to working with outputs in the gallery. Since we have a lot of questions and I was able to see that we had a lot of questions related to shared folders, then that's the first one I created. And of course, we can start doing a lot of analysis here, but the idea was for me to get a sense of what I need to be working to get more interaction from the end users, or to get more views, or to get more likes. As a competitive person, I would like to be the most viewed YouTuber related to Outreach. So that's why I'm doing things
that's why
like
you're
this.
playing the chess game, right?
Yeah.
To figure out some different angles here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And I think when we talk about this, right, part of it's getting down to the root of the issue, which Emil was asking, what does the lamentize mean? And that's essentially like if we look at words in general, right? Um, so let's take, let's see if I can find another, like this as an example, right? So if we look at this comment, and I'm hovering my mouse over this like you can see it, but if you look at this comment below, right, there's a certificates are gaining popularity, right? So the root words of those are gain and popular. That's essentially what it's doing, so that way it can tighten those around if you're using the same uh, type of words, right? It allows them to be clustered a little easier by getting to the root of the word, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, I
So,
think I can show that here. That's a very great asset here. So we are basically simplifying for us to get all the similar words. And for example, everything related to the verb to be will be
yes.
always be. And that will be
Hmm.
easier for us when you start cleaning the data. So as you can see here, for example, would be, I think I could create here, for example, uh, this is the number of words, of different words that we have
Hmm.
after processing my data, and I could create
Yeah.
basically the same thing before the pre-process, and maybe I would see something 10 times higher
Yeah.
number, number of words, right?
It's interesting because like with stuff like that, if you were to take a look at, let's say you were in from an again an education standpoint, if you were in something like a group called Toastmasters, have you ever heard of Toastmasters before, Fernando? So Toastmasters is interesting because essentially it's like a public speaking education group. So what they want to do is help each other as a group with public speaking, right? And when we talk about public speaking, one of the things that's most common practice is actually verbal pauses. So like the uhs, the likes, whatever filler you like to put in there, right? Those aspects are things that you could kind of factor in. And when we look at this from an analysis perspective, you could essentially eliminate those and see, or even count how many likes did we say during the course of this presentation, right? Um, or or even like Emil is talking about, so survey data analysis, right? So another example would be maybe we're polling people at the end because you and I both know not only we may want to share the same class together or with your friends, but we also want to know that, hey, the professor is going to be really easygoing, right? Their core, the things that we're going to be taught are worth learning. So you can see some of how surveys play into that, especially when we get to higher education, because if you're selecting your professor now, those qualitative analytics factor in, and that's almost just like your solutions, Fernando, because we may want to see, hey, not only do you want to be the one who's helping answer all the questions, he had said like, hey, I want to know that people like the things that I'm providing, right? And that's why I'm searching specifically for those things that are essentially going to provide the most value.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I have one last thing to show. Of course, this is related to analyzing the content for me to start posting, but also I have the
Yeah,
second part of this workflow, and that's more related to what users are currently doing on the community. So, of course,
mm,
this is for me to start checking actually how well I'm doing for my ACE quota. So, if I'm
nice.
participating enough, um, and actually, it's a way of learning as well. And I always say that I actually learn more from the community than for all my years of projects in Alteryx, because you have a lot of really small things that the users are doing that we actually didn't know it was possible related to designer server. And I always say this when we talk about this kind of things. And I remember one topic, we had like 7 or 8 different aces trying to provide a solution for a problem all at the same time. A lot of different workflows, and I had created one with 30 different tools, if I recall.
Wow.
And we had one user there, not an ace, and he was able to solve that problem with one formula tool and one function.
Nice.
And that's why you are we are always learning, right? So we never
Mm,
know when we don't know something, and for us to have a bunch of people asking question or testing that tool, that's the best way for us to start learning something. So lastly, and this only for me to show how well I'm doing, then I have something here on the gallery. So I'm doing that on I'm, I have all those workflows scheduled, right, to
nice.
get the most recent data. And the last one here is this community user analyzer. So this not only for my user, this one that we have on our data mining server, but we can track all the users from the community actually. So of course I have mine here. I can filter dates, but let me just run a very simple report. Please don't judge. So what I have here, my username, the number of solutions, number of likes, number of replies, and also here when I'm participating. Of course, as you can see here, a lot of participation. This was related to when I was trying to become an ace. So I thought, let's try to answer more questions, do more things in the community to see if I'm able to become an ace, right?
Yeah,
And now, after becoming an ace, of course, I had some months here to rest a bit, to enjoy my title, and then
yeah,
now it's my new normal here to always be in the community, helping others. Also, of course, I have here ways to check my most recent solutions, most liked messages to see if I want to gather more likes. That's not the case, so I can check what I actually did on that. Maybe I was more polite. Maybe I share more knowledge. That
hmm
way I can answer better everyone there.
yeah. And I think what's interesting about this as you evolve as an ace, right? Typically, the questions that we start solving tend to be harder ones, right? So there tends to be less that we're solving. So maybe as where before you were more active on designer
Yeah,
um, use cases, right? So that's like desktop solutions. Now you're working a little bit more on some of the larger aspects, like maybe server questions, etc. And I think when we look at the volume, right, that's not necessarily indicative of complexity. So even when we talk about education, right, so you could crank through a volume of students, and when we talk about all of this that we're discussing, right, whether it's Zoom meetings, etc., there's no reason why with Zoom you couldn't technically, as an instructor, have 100, or honestly, even in some of my university classes, there were like 800 students in one class, but they would have TAs and other things kind of there. So it's interesting to see, again, kind of how this evolves and how we're going to evolve education. And what I think is interesting with that is before it would be you would have a room with an instructor who maybe had less students, right? So when we talk about having less students, that essentially is what allowed it to equate to more customization. And then now, like what you're showing is essentially, hey, based on the questions that we're seeing here today, I could actually cater the content better and still maintain just as many students, and I could be responsive rather than waiting for them to take a test to see what type of engagement they have. And when we look at that, I mean, I think that's really where the future of education is going. And you even have things like SparkED, et cetera, within um, the Alteryx community, as well as other communities where there's open source, right, or free assets, not only for students who are just trying to learn, but also instructors. So
Yeah, yeah. And we were talking about certificates before. That's something that we did also in the community. So, but that was for us to try seeing everyone that had the advanced certificate in Author. So, but that was for hiring purposes. So that was actually a big deal for us as well. So if you have your certificate, your advanced certificate, then I scrape the website to see all the users and then for us to try contacting them. So
yeah,
yeah.
that's pretty sweet.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I think, is there anything else that you wanted to add today for Fernando for education? Any chess tips for anyone who's joining us today?
Actually, no, the only thing I would like to invite anyone. So if you want to play chess with me, that's the only thing.
Hit you up on LinkedIn and
Let's
keep
play
giving
some
your
chess.
chess hit. Yeah, I like that. That's a good call out. And I think when we're looking at this, right, I'll go ahead and post it in the chat as well. If you do want to sign up for a Transform Tuesday, feel free to go ahead and sign up via the message here in the chat. And what that'll allow you to do is you can see all the topics that we have coming up next, which next week is actually going to be Data Plus Women. So if we have any women who are joining us, um, or you have friends maybe who would like to speak on the topic, please feel free to sign up or encourage them to sign up so we can continue doing the show. And as always, thank you to our employer and sponsor of this platform, Data Meaning. We do plenty of training and then also change management in regards to helping people understand data transformation. And tomorrow, of course, one of our favorite shows, Three Charts at 3 p.m., we'll be going over education as well in the form of visualizations. So awesome. Happy Tuesday, everyone. Thank you, Fernando, for joining us this week. And we look forward to seeing everyone next week. Have a great week.